Welcome to the Quadruple Bottom Line, the fourth in a six-part series on the frameworks for sustainability in the course Principles and Methodologies for Sustainable Design. And my name is Professor Rob Fleming. Last week we looked at the triple bottom line, the accounting methodology for sustainability, very effective. We did end, however, with asking whether it was comprehensive or holistic enough to capture everything that we might want to do in terms of sustainability. So as a response, this week we're going to look at the development of the quadruple bottom line. Let's get started, shall we? I'm sure that all of you now are tired of reading this statement over and over again, so I won't read it again, but I do point out the two words in red, needs of the present and needs of the future. And I wonder if we can really delve more deeply into those human needs, we can begin to better understand a holistic framework for sustainability. So this is Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a pretty well recognized and well received framework for understanding human motivations and human needs in a pyramid relationship here. So this, and I should say before I start that this was an idea that was developed by myself and Dr. Chris Pastor here at Philadelphia University a number of years ago, when we were really trying to grapple with sustainability, trying to understand what it really means. And this chart has been very helpful for us. So at the lowest level, or the basic needs, you'll see physiological needs like food, water, warmth, rest, breathing, etc. And what's interesting is Maslow argues that in order to go higher into the pyramid and develop further as an individual, everything below that must be met. So if you're worrying about getting food or water, you're pretty much not evolving as a human being forward. And then if you don't have safety and security, the same problem exists. You can't really go forward and look at some of the other opportunities in life. Eventually, if those needs are met, you can start to explore intimacy, relationships, friends, etc. You start to build a social community that also builds you up. And eventually you get to a sense of feeling of accomplishment or prestige. And these are all, again, needs that must be met in order for us to go to transcendent self-fulfillment needs or achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. And that's what got us to thinking about this hierarchy, is that we were wondering how design could begin to be an element within sustainability that made sense. So let's take that a little further and see how that plays out. So the logic pattern is, if I want to be sustainable then, and designers must meet human needs now and into the future, how does architecture and design specifically fulfill human needs? Seems like a really basic question that should be easy to answer. It's actually not at all. So we're going to take a look at the quadruple bottom line as a way to answer this. So let's start with this first level of needs. And on the left side, you see a little pyramid with the number 1. That means that we're looking at the basic human needs, physiological needs, and safety needs. And so what I have is a little mantra here that says, regenerate our ecology. So in order to meet those needs like food, water, shelter, we need to have an ecology that's stable not only now, but also well into the future, so that future generations can meet those same needs. This is a basic requirement of sustainability. Some would argue that safety comes before the environment. I'm not so sure. I think ultimately the environment is at the base of the pyramid. And we see lots of examples of organizations trying to help current society meet that imperative to regenerate our ecology. So here you see the United States Green Building Council, which was formed in 1993 now, over the last 20 years or so, really has spread the gospel, so to speak, of green building around the world through the LEED rating system. And you see here a little bit of a chart that explains just how far-reaching that is. And LEED has transformed the marketplace. So not only has it been a nonprofit agenda, but it also has led to a transformation of the marketplace, or a for-profit opportunity for many. And so what LEED did was what USGBC did is they went and did a lot of research and found all kinds of metrics from other environmental groups that could be applied to the green building momentum there. So you see, for example, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, sustainable sites. These categories are all based on metrics that can be quantitatively understood. So for the first time for designers, architects, landscape architects, etc., there was an accepted metric by which we could all agree to play on the same court, so to speak. And so that helped us to meet level 1. But you know, we saw in lecture 1 of this series that we have to go a lot more than just mitigating our impacts on the natural world. We actually have to go to a regenerative model. What does that really mean? Well, it means things like net zero energy buildings, net zero water projects, net zero waste projects. an orange list of materials or a red list of materials to get toxins out of the atmosphere, meeting target budgets, and of course we'll be covering all this in weeks 5 and 6. This is a great diagram from one of the studies done by USGBC to see where could LEED go in the future, to where a LEED gold building, and I'm looking all the way to the right, for example, I'm looking right up here, a LEED gold building could actually have a zero impact. And a LEED platinum building would begin to reverse those curves and begin to regenerate the natural world. And that's the ultimate goal of what we're trying to do here, and certainly the goal of this course. So let's go up to level 2 needs. These would be intrinsic psychological needs. The mantra here is strengthen community. So if I'm an architect, a planner, a designer, and I'm thinking about buildings and interiors, what I want to do is strengthen community. I want to build esteem for society through projects that achieve personal and collective pride of accomplishment, but also create viable shared public space, which is really critical to what we're looking at here. This level addresses relatively subjective aspects of human experience at the scale of buildings and communities. Really almost impossible to have a rating system for this because the definitions of community change quite often. But here is the Great Lawn at the University of Virginia by Thomas Jefferson. And here is how viable shared space can really create a sense of pride and accomplishment. Here's another model of how urban space can be developed, the suburbs. And it's hard to imagine in a situation like this that the sense of community could be developed. However, I know that it does get developed. It's questionable about where that can go. And certainly from level 1 physical needs, these kind of developments eat up a lot of resources for today's generations and for future generations. So the question that we'll answer in week 7 is whether the suburbs is a sustainable proposition. Might be, we'll see. This is Pamplona, Spain, the running of the bulls, and you see the interaction between the architecture and the public space, the sense that it's all one continuous, seamless community that can connect. Now, of course, that has lots of negativities too, but the idea here is to look at what could be more sustainable than a community like this. And so we begin to look at cities and urban spaces as opportunities, not just to save resources, but also to create shared, viable experiences for today and for the future. Now, if we go up to Maslow's third level, which is the spiritual level or the transcendent level, what we talk about here is this idea of striving for beauty. And these words here, uniqueness, unity, aliveness, all of these words are Maslow's words for a person that has reached the level 1 of self-actualization. But what if we took those words and we use those like a LEED rating system, for example, for a definition of what good design could be? So now these words become drivers of design. And so let's take a quick look through history and take a look at some examples of where this might have been met. And so here, though, the problem is the strive for beauty is difficult because who can agree on what is beautiful? And so we have to agree that beauty does occur in a myriad of ways. And so let's just take a look at that. Lance Hosey, in his book, The Shape of Green, argues that if it's not beautiful, it's not sustainable. He talks about the idea of the laws of attraction in nature as a basis of ecological strength. Why can't we begin to apply those same principles in the design of the built environment? And there is a reading from Lance in the week 3.0 module page that is really great that you can read and get a lot more detail on what he's talking about. So I'm going to go back in time. This is the Brionne Cemetery by Carlos Scarpa. A really amazing landscape architecture project that keeps getting renovated over and over again. And somehow the relationship between the concrete, which you wouldn't think of as a sustainable material, and the greenery creates this place that is considered valuable and therefore worth renovating now and into the future. Another example, very different example, could be the Eden Project by Nicholas Grimshaw, built in England. And here the conception of beauty is quite different. And by the way, these are giant pillow domes that each one of those hexagons, those pillows can open and close and allow sun to come in or not come in. So it's really a living, breathing building on some level. When I go inside, I begin to see that this building houses giant ecosystems. And so you could argue that this is a transcendent building, that this building will be renovated and taken care of for generations to come. Another example might be Taliesin West by Frank Lloyd Wright. Here you see how the architect uses elements from the site, like the stone that you see in the walls there, as a way to ground the aesthetics back into the environment. Also, the story goes that the fins on the canvas roof of Taliesin West were actually shading the roof like cacti would use its own self-shading principles. This building has been renovated over and over again. It gets about 1 million visitors a year. So something is going on here that makes this building different from other buildings that get torn down in 50 to 100 years. How about this building? This is Bilbao by Frank Gehry. This is the Bilbao Museum. You know, and we could debate about whether it's beautiful. It's pretty widely recognized as a beautiful building, and does so through a very different kind of process of these titanium panels that reflect the sun and create a sense of lightness of the building. I would note here, if you think about level 1 needs from Maslow, think about 1 million titanium laptops, and think about the environmental impact that it would take to build this building. So while I'll agree that it's beautiful, many would argue that it really doesn't fit within sustainability because of its impact on natural resources. This is Arato Isazaki's Disney headquarters. This is what you see when you walk into the lobby, connecting the elements of the sun's movement to the time of day and to the experience that one has in a building. Basically a simple office building, but now transported into this new level of transcendent sustainability. And Frank Lloyd Wright's Guggenheim, which, if you've been to that part of New York City, is really saving that area of the city from the monotony of the 10-story box apartments. And it really works on many, many levels, not just as an element of sculpture, but it still serves to define the street. So if you look at this brow that he puts here, it still urbanistically does support the sidewalk and creates a sense of shared, viable public space. It's really pretty profound. And this building, not only is it getting renovated over and over, it's getting added to consistently. And this is Villa Savoy by Le Corbusier. And interestingly, when I look at this building, I mean, this is really one of the genesis buildings for the international style, which goes against many of the principles of sustainability. But if you look at this building, something pretty magical is happening up here on this roof terrace. And there's a lot of principles in his 5 points of architecture that do have a lot to do with sustainability, and makes this building in many ways transcendent. But playfulness, this is, again, Maslow's words, playfulness. This is Philippe Starck's beer garden in Tokyo, and what a way to break up the skyline and create a sense of wonder and playfulness. Similarly, this is James Wine's Site Architect's Best Showrooms back in the late 60s, early 70s. And here was the first time, not the first time, but here when society started to use bricks as veneer, Site Architects decides to play with that and expose the fact that the brick no longer is an actual structural element. And by the way, the little VW there, that's very similar to the car that we drove to Woodstock. Do you remember all the way back to the first lecture? We'll see. Playfulness in interiors, and this may be an example of biophilic design gone too far, I'm not sure. Or it could be a really awesome interiors. We'll have to talk about that one later. And this is the view of falling water that people don't see, which is the integration or unity between the landscape and the building. It's actually the back side of the building. It's really my favorite part of the building. And the other idea here is not only unity between man and nature, but unity at multiple scales. So the motifs that Wright uses on the outside of the building repeat on the inside to create a series of experiences that are choreographed and unified in a way that's really unique and rare. I should mention that this building is visited by millions of people a year, and somebody complained about the fact that the cantilevers were sagging, and I should remind the audience that this was designed as a weekend house for 4 people. So let's give Mr. Wright a little bit of a break. This is Neustadt's Gallery in Stuttgart, one of my favorite buildings of all time. And we talked a lot about level 2 sustainability, which is sense of community. And what's amazing about this building is you can go from here, this part of Stuttgart, and go all the way up through all of these ramps and get all the way to this part of Stuttgart, which is on a different level, without ever paying admission into the museum. And oh, and by the way, along the way, you can look through the windows and see the changing exhibits of the artwork. It's really a phenomenal building from a sense of community standpoint. And for those of you who are landscape architects might recognize this as Luis Barragan's horse farm, which continues to be renovated over and over and continues to have great intrinsic value.